here. There we go. All right. Yeah, whenever I am done with my first live, then I go for like a walk. So I go take like an hour walk for my walk. So 2 miles out, 2 miles back in. And it's like up and down, up and down. So I get my workout and I get my exercise that way. And also it's really good for grounding. Like for those of y'all who really want to ground, go for a walk because it's the best approach in my opinion. But today it's raining. So, I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm not going walking today. So, and my partner, he normally goes walking with me as well. And he was like, I'm going to take a break today. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to take a break too. Cause I was going to take a day off of walking a few days ago. And then he talked me into walking after all. And I was like, okay, I guess so. Cause I ate bad that day. So I was like, okay, I guess so. So now I was like, all right, well, so I'm back. And, I thought, well, shoot, I'm just going to be sitting around reading for an hour. I might as well just get on here and start the study group early. So if I caught some of you off guard with starting the study group early, my bad. I don't want to just like twiddle my fingers and like just sit here. So I thought this would be just a great way to get started with the study group early. So, so for those of you tuning in who are new, so the free readings and the personal questions, that was in the last live. That's when I do readings for people. So this hour we're doing our study group, which is basically going over we're reading literature, we're reading books. Right now we're doing Course in Miracles, and then on Fridays we do Conversations with God by Neil Donald Walsh. And what we do is I basically read the material and then I comment and I give my own understanding and awareness of the information. So that way, what happened there? Hold on a second, guys. Okay, there it goes. It's back. All right, back to this. I don't know what happened there. It's like the other video stopped. So I had to start all over again. Okay, going back to this. So the unwatched mind, and what they're talking about here, when they talk about the unwatched mind, they're actually talking about the unconscious or the subconscious. So they're talking about the levels of mind or of being that you aren't paying as much attention to. You're kind of just like autopilot, working through life with this kind of happening on its own. So that's what they're talking about, the unwatched mind. The unwatched mind is responsible for the whole content of the unconscious, which lies above the miracle level. All psychoanalytic theorists have made some contribution to the truth in this connection, but none of them has seen it in its true entirety. Jung's best contribution, Carl Jung, Jung's best contribution was an awareness of individual versus collective unconscious levels. He also recognized the major place of the religious spirit in his schema. I think that's what he's trying to say. His archetypes were also meaningful concepts, but his major error lay in regarding the deepest level of the unconscious as shared in terms of content. The deepest level of the unconscious is shared as an ability. Let me actually unclick this so I don't forget. The deepest level of the unconscious is shared as an ability. As miracle-mindedness, the content or the particular miracles which an individual happens to perform does not matter at all. They will in fact be entirely different since I direct them, because I make a point of avoiding redundancy. Unless a miracle actually heals, it is not a miracle at all. The content of the miracle level is not recorded in the individual's unconscious, but because if it were, the miracle would not be automatic or involuntary, which we have said repeatedly that it should be. However, the content is a matter for the record, which is not within the individual himself. Okay, so there's a whole lot going on with that one. So what they're trying to talk about, they're trying to acknowledge the connection between the miraculous things that occur, which from the perspective of the book, when they talk about miracles, again, I refer to it as synchronicities and alignment. So when we have synchronicities and alignment, it seems as if we are being pulled along, or we're having kind of a pull effect with the universe or with this reality. And so we're being kind of summoned and pulled forward. When you're not in alignment and when you're not really in alignment with synchronicities. You may still experience some sort of synchronicities, but the synchronicities are going to have more to do with your state of being and your state of mind, not necessarily with the opportunity to experience the fullness of a miracle, which is alignment and the synchronicities. So you're not technically aligned in a way that you're going to benefit from, and there's no ability to be able to expand and to allow for a healing or for a deeper awareness of self as form and also as self as God. And so when they are referring to like the miracle mindedness, that's referring to, you know, going with the flow, being in that flow state, and that flow state driving you and pulling you forward, and it not only showing you or giving to you the opportunity to experience miracles, synchronicities, alignments, but like things happening that you don't really have to force or have to do. They just kind of start to materialize in front of you. It's a really interesting state of being, but the flow state is like a really great place to be and to sustain yourself in. Most people don't spend a lot of their energy or time in a flow state because a flow state is not an easy thing to achieve when you've been conditioned not to be in a flow state. For example, here's an example, and actually here's one example. I just was having a conversation with a client, I think this was a few days ago, and I was talking to her, and you know, I asked, how are you, sweetheart? How are you doing? How are you doing? And she was asking me, and it just, you know, randomly got into conversation. I said, you know, it's so interesting that we are so conditioned to looking at what's wrong in this world or to looking at what's not working. Rarely are we conditioned to just express joy and appreciation with other people. And because whenever something actually does seem to be working for us or seems to be going in the right direction, we tend to feel guilty if we're sharing our joy or we're sharing what we're going through from a positive perspective with others. And so we tend to pull back or we tend to hold back, and we don't always express ourselves. We kind of limit like what we can share with others, because if they're not okay, if they're suffering or they're miserable, it almost feels like you're rubbing it in their faces. And that's a conditioned response. You know, I grew up thinking that whenever people ask you, how are you doing? They either do one of two things. They say, oh, I'm fine. They're not really fine. Or they will go on and on and on about a struggle that they are not able to work past or not able to get through, and it's completely consumed every aspect of their life. And so it's either people like that, or it's people who say, no, nothing's wrong, but they're not okay. But rarely are we okay or we feel comfortable with sharing when something is going great. And so nowadays when people ask me like, how are you doing? I'm like, oh, I'm doing incredible. Thanks so much for asking. I'm doing really well. And so I try to focus on that. And actually a few weeks ago, I had a client, and I guess she wasn't able to keep her appointment, but she didn't want to cancel it. So her husband decided to take the slot. But he wasn't really prepared with questions. I don't think he understood or he knew what kind of session it was. I think he just wanted to talk, which was fine. I mean, I'm okay to talk. I'm okay to talk for 15 minutes. But the thing about it was that when I'm working, I'm very much in autopilot mode. So I'm prepared for what I have to do, which is I have to tune in or I have to give information that has to do with, you know, what they're wanting to know about. But he didn't have any real questions about that. He was just wanting to chat. So it was fine, but we got into talking. And at one point he was asking me like, you know, tell me, he was like, you know, tell me about yourself. And I'm like, oh, I wasn't sure how to react to that. I was like, I don't know. I'm not used to talking about myself when I'm, you know, doing something for someone else. I'm not used to talking about myself. And so I was like, okay. And then, I think he could tell that I was struggling with the conversation and just like talking in that way. Not only that, but also I do get more uncomfortable around males just because of my own struggles with dealing with males and stuff. So it is a little harder for me to deal with males. But I was like, and I think that I think he was trying to have a nice dialogue or conversation, but there was really no point to the conversation other than just like throwing stuff out there to talk about. And then there was like random chit chat. But towards the end of it, he was like, you know, well, he could tell I was struggling, right? So I was like, okay, I don't know what to do. I don't know what you're wanting from me, you know? And he said, well, tell me what's the worst thing that's happened to you today, or what are you struggling with today, or what are you having a difficult thing with today? And I was like, I don't. So, and that question in itself, I wasn't prepared for either, because I didn't have anything wrong with me. I wasn't struggling that week. I was doing fine. I mean, it was a great week. And even if I have like one moment or one like situation that throws me off, I'm not going to let it like unravel the entire week. I'm like, well, that's like its own little thing, and I'm going to focus on everything else and let that be. So I didn't know how to respond to that either, because I didn't have anything that I was struggling with, and I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna have to invent something to because you're like really wanting me to like share like my struggles. I'm not having any struggles right now. I'm okay. I'm like, life is great. So I was like, okay. And I started, and I brought up the mask thing. That's what I was like, let me bring up something that I can. So I brought up the mask and vaccination thing, and we got into a conversation about masks and vaccinations. And granted, this is this is a guy from Texas. So, and he just happened to be out in public, with some other lady and people walking by and stuff. Nobody was wearing masks. And I was just like, I expressed frustration. I was like, well, I mean, if I'm going to like grasp for anything that's frustrating, I would say it's kind of frustrating that people are not considerate of others and that they're not masking up when it could make a difference for one person. And also people who are just, it's one thing if you don't want to get the vaccination. If you don't want to get the vaccination, you don't have to get the vaccination. That's your personal choice. That's your personal decision. No one's going to force you to. However, don't open your mouth about what I'm doing because you have people running around and they're trying to pressure people into doing things. Mask is one thing. Mask is like a general health thing, which no one's going to die from wearing a mask. I have yet to hear of a person that's died from wearing a mask. That's just a precautionary thing. Doctors wear gloves when they're in the hospital. You wear sunscreen when you go out to whatever. Here in Santa Fe, because when it's windy, when it's cold and you breathe in that cold air, it's not fun because it can mess with your lungs. So sometimes we actually wear stuff already. It's like, what's the difference between wearing a mask because it's cold versus wearing a mask just because it's a precautionary thing to do? So we got into that conversation and anything like that. But it was just an interesting because I'm going off on a tangent here. But yeah, we're not conditioned, coming back to what I was originally talking to, we're not conditioned to sharing like what we're really doing well or how we're doing well because we feel guilty about it. We're only conditioned to expressing whatever's wrong. And if we don't have something to complain about, then it feels unnatural. How often have you had someone tell you, how are you doing today? And you're like, oh, I'm doing great, or it's a great, but it doesn't feel as natural when they're sharing what they're experiencing and they're not doing too well. So that's just another example of like that mindset and how sometimes we're conditioned to operate that way. We don't even realize it. And it's in the little things that we encounter on a regular basis. And it's something that we have to work towards or something that we have to work on. And that's the work. That's the key to shifting your state of being and to aligning with, more miracles and experiences that will be beneficial for you. You have to basically deprogram yourself from those like prior states of being, states of operating, and you have to kind of recondition yourself in a completely different way, in a new way that doesn't always feel natural. So that's what they're referring to here. Number 5, all psychoanalysts made one common error in that they attempted to uncover unconscious content. You cannot understand unconscious activity in these terms because content is applicable only to the more superficial unconscious levels to which the individual himself contributes. This is the level at which he can readily introduce fear and usually does. Freud was right in calling this level preconsciousness. Oh, preconscious. It's preconscious. And emphasizing that there is a fairly easy interchange between preconscious and conscious material. He was also right in regarding the censor as an agent for the protection of consciousness from fear. Oh, that's interesting. His major error, let me stop there for a second because that's actually pertaining to what I'm writing in my book. So right now I'm in the process of writing my first book. I've done, chapter 1's done. We're on chapter 2 now. And chapter 2 has a lot to do with belief and with ideas and how that can hurt you or get in the way of you developing and really getting the most out of your psychic ability, because I believe we all have psychic ability. And that's what I work on. I work on teaching people how to use their own psychic ability, because everybody that I've worked with they have it. Everybody has it. It's not like, oh, you're special or you're gifted. I hate it when people say you have a gift. Even though I know people still do it, I don't like it being referred to as a gift, because maybe I was born more sensitive. That's already like an advantage, but I busted my ass to build myself up. And it's almost like you want to go, like if you go up to, let's say, if you go up to Beyonce and you say, oh, you're music is a gift. Like, no, she busted her ass. She spent like decades building up her voice and her control and her ability to be able to get to this point in her life. So it's not a gift. She started off with a predisposition to maybe sing, but she worked her ass off to get to that point. So whenever people refer to it as a gift, I'm like, no, because it throws it in a completely different category, and I don't consider it to be a gift. So what was I talking about? Because I totally lost my train of thought. Fear of material. Oh yeah. So right now, what I'm talking about in section 2 and chapter 2 of the book, which I'm almost done with as well, we are talking about like people's beliefs and people's ideas and how their beliefs and ideas can actually affect their psychic development. And I was explaining this to my partner a few days ago when we were walking, because what tends to happen is when people start to have an emerging psychic ability and they don't shun it away, what tends to occur is that at that point, their ability is either going to operate from a premise of a belief system that they are accepting, or it's going to be experienced in a more authentic way. If you come from a background, or if you come from a mindset where everything is, angels talk and angels this and angels that, and you're obsessed with angels, then the way you will experience your psychic ability will be through the filter of angelic topics or angelic phenomena. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's accurate. That's just the filter that you are utilizing to understand the experience and the phenomena, the information. If you go at it from a more authentic perspective and you don't place a filter on it, what you start to get is a lot more direct and more specific information that falls outside of the parameters of everything being angelic based. And so it opens you up to more receptivity, it opens you up to more accuracy, it opens you up to more detail in a very different way. And so if you believe that the world is purple, everything is purple, everything is purple, and then you go out into the world, you're choosing to only accept that the world is purple. And so all that you encounter and experience will be like forced into that reality because it's what you've chosen. It's what your intended and belief is based around. It's your state of being. So there's the opportunity to experience, a different color, green, this or that, is probably going to be limited or non-existent because you're trying to control the way you're experiencing this. But if you go out with just an open mind and an open heart, and you're willing to trust the process and have faith, you actually start to experience things in a much more authentic fashion. And that's what I decided to do when I developed my psychic ability, because I started off being growing up Catholic, growing up in the church. That was where everything was based for me. For me, it was always based on what was written in the book, or what I was taught as a child, or this belief system or that belief system. So everything was stuck in that box of Catholicism. And as I got older and I decided to break away from Catholicism and just follow my own path, the Catholicism filter was kind of stripped away, and then I was able to experience much more of an accurate depiction or an accurate representation of energy and have an experience that's more genuine. And so that's what they're talking about here. So when they're saying Freud was right in calling this level preconscious and emphasizing that there is a fairly easy interchange between preconscious and conscious material, he was also right in regarding the sensor or filter. He was right in regarding the filter as an agent for protection of consciousness from fear. In other words, some of the people who only choose to experience things through this box, there's nothing wrong with that. That's just a mechanism or a mode of understanding things. It is limiting. I will say that it is limiting, because it is limiting to the fact that you have to believe in a certain system to be able to utilize what you're getting. So unless it has a taste of Catholicism attached to it, or a taste of angelic, stuff attached to it, it is limiting you. You are not going to get anything beyond that. It's stuck in that framework. And we soul washed ourselves into that. We bought into the reality of this form and this beingness, which is the human form. That in itself is a traumatic experience, because it is a stripping away, in essence, of love, or the fullness of love, the fullness of acceptance, the fullness of what truly is, and we find ourselves in the dark. and then we freak out because we're in the dark. We're used to being in the light, and we're in the dark, and we either have to produce the light within ourselves, or we have to look around to see if we can find it in each other and then create the experience of light in mass. And that's where it gets tricky, because life is not one solid, lit up, place. We are all very different, and many times we grasp and hold on to fear in our decisions and in our actions. And our fear will hold us to darkness in a way that continues to perpetuate the illusion and the lie, which is that we're separate. And that's what they're talking about right here. The idea of will therapy was potentially a very powerful one, but Rank did not see its real potential, because he himself used his mind partly to create a theory of the mind, but also partly to attack Freud. His reactions to Freud stemmed from his own unfortunate acceptance of the deprivation fallacy, which itself arose from the separation. This led him to believe that his own mind's creation could stand only if the creation of another's fell. In consequence, his theory emphasized rather than minimized the two-edged nature of defenses. Okay, let me go back to this because this is important. So what is being discussed here is the idea that, so Freud's idea or concept is that there are these levels of awareness, and that's pretty much what he's talking about, levels of awareness, and a lot of things are based in one level, which is attached to fear. But they're referring to Freud, and then they're referring to this other character who is Rank. His name is Rank, and he it seems from what they're explaining here, because they didn't go into who this Rank person is, they just kind of dropped him out of nowhere. So, and FYI, Helen Schumann, who is the author of the book, she was a psychiatrist, which is why they're having conversations that actually she would perfectly understand, because she's a psychiatrist. And so she would be familiar with Freud, with Rank, and all these other individuals. So this is why the conversation has a lot of elements that only she would grasp. But I'm able to understand it because I know where she's going with that. And so the idea of the unfortunate acceptance of the deprivation fallacy. In other words, they're acknowledging that, as we became separate through the grand illusion, some of us thought or began to believe that the only way that we could recover from the separation, or we could be okay, was to ensure that someone else was doing worse. Because there was this concept of that there's only so much love then. Now that we're separated, there isn't an infinite amount of love. There isn't an infinite amount of connection. There's only separation, and there's only limitation. Because of this, in order for one individual to do better, one other individual has to do worse. And so what it seems like is that this guy Rank was basically supporting an idea based on some people need to suffer or need to do worse so that others can do better. So there's almost like an inequality that's kind of built into that. No one as yet has fully recognized either the therapeutic value of fear or the only way in which it can truly be ended. When you miscreate, you are in pain. The cause and effect principle here is temporarily a real expediter. Actually, cause is a term properly belonging to God. An effect, which should be capitalized, is his sonship. I'm going to stop there for a second because that's important. And so what they're saying here is that cause is God, meaning the source of all things, the progenitor, the producer, the manifester, the grand manifester that starts with God or with source. And then the effect is the sonship, which we're the sonship. We're the sonship, so we're the effect. And then it duplicates. It continues to duplicate and replicates and duplicates. So it's a duplicating, replicating effect and scenario that we all continue to perpetuate, because that's what we are. We are God creating creation. And so as we've been created, we continue to create to produce more creation. It's an ongoing thing that's never going to stop. And that's what they're talking about. But the sonship is us. We are the sonship. This entails a set of cause and effect relationships which are totally different from those which humanity introduced into the miscreation. The fundamental opponents in the real basic conflict are creation and miscreation. All fear is implicit in the second, just as all love is inherent in the first. So creation is based in love, miscreation is based in fear. Most of us do not realize that when we're not awakened and we're not intentionally living and we're present in the moment and and we're aware of our interconnectedness to each other, we tend to produce out of fear. And so a lot of our miscreations are fear-based. So if let's say someone goes and they get like a boob job, they're not they're not doing it out of love for creation. It's a miscreation, meaning that they're doing it out of fear of rejection. So that's a good example. If someone is going to go and try to, actually I was just watching this yesterday. We were watching a documentary, and there's in the I think it's in Ukraine or it's in Russia, where they basically have made it okay to create designer babies. And what that is essentially they take the genetic material of the male and of the female, and they go through looking for certain DNA sequences that would indicate whether this would turn into a male or a female baby, whether this would be blue-eyed or brown-eyed. And so when you look at places like here in the States, we tend there's a lot of people who prefer blue eyes because people want what they don't have. And so apparently from that designer thing, it was like people from the US choose like blue-eyed babies. They want their babies to have blue eyes. But when you go to like what was it? And they want babies that have brown eyes because they all have blue eyes. So it's almost like people want what they don't have. But we were watching this documentary, and people were producing or creating designer babies. They were essentially picking and choosing at these places. They were picking and choosing the genetics that would basically give them the kind of child that they wanted. Now, a big reason that they had started doing this was to reduce the incidence of children being born with conditions that would make it difficult for them to have a normal life. And so they were trying to reduce the incidence of that. And then this kind of flipped into something else, and now it's like designer babies. And so that's what that's about. And there's people on both sides who have big issues with it. Here's the thing that I feel about this, and this is just a personal opinion. Personally, I am 100% on board with reducing the incidence of having children be born with conditions that are going to limit their ability to have and experience a full life. Now, that doesn't mean that people who do struggle and do have conditions, that they're not able to have a full life. But coming from a family where I have a schizophrenic mother and there's a lot of mental illness in my family, I would gladly want my mother to have been born without a gene that gave her schizophrenia, and so forth and so forth. But it becomes a sketchy line because, there was, in the documentary, there was a lot of people, usually the religious folks, they were jumping in and they were like, it's wrong, it's laws and all this other stuff. So they're coming from a religious perspective, a religious view. I have no doubt in my mind that if I went up to one of those religious nuts and said, okay, well, we have the ability to remove the gay element from this person's genome so that they're born straight. Are you okay with that? I have no doubt in my mind that these same people would basically like contradict themselves and say, oh yeah, I'm okay with, because, and immediately it becomes a completely different conversation. And so it really is in the eye of the beholder. But I think that it's important that, that technology, that research, it should definitely be about improving our lives as human beings and reducing the incidence of children who are suffering or who are going to suffer. With that being said, the idea of designing a specific baby or a specific look or a specific thing, that's based in fear. It's based in the idea that I want to be able to love and care for this child, and I want to feel a connection to this child. I don't know if I will, so I'm going to design it in a way where I am automatically it's going to have some things going for it, so that way I can basically really bond with this child or have this thing. And that's kind of like a fear-based ideology or miscreation. So I feel like it's a to say that the child will not be a unique individual, or that they're not going to be, a child that is fine. in that way. I'm not talking about the child itself. I'm talking about the parent and their reasoning for it. There are a lot of people, I know I've heard this over and over again with clients, especially female clients, where they don't really, they're in a relationship and they want committed relationship with this person, but the person hasn't committed to them. And they believe that if they have this person's child, then this person will be committed to them. And that's a miscreation. And so they're producing a miscreation. It isn't in alignment with creation, and they're miscreating. That doesn't mean that it's a waste or that that experience will not be utilized by them or by their soul. And it doesn't mean that they're not loved and that that's all not acceptable. It just means that it's a miscreation. It's based in a level of fear, not in a level of love and understanding. All right, so let me go through here because I want to see what, see, there's a troll right there, Joe Honia. That's a troll, y'all. So be careful because y'all are pretty much going to end up getting y'all's money taken if y'all decide to talk to them. So let me go ahead and I'm going to bookmark this because we'll stop there. So let me go through some of the questions about the content. We're only doing content-based questions, guys. No readings. Cassidy's like, so glad I didn't miss it. I need to charge my phone. Yeah, I was like I said, I was like, well, I'm just going to sit here and read. I might as well just jump on here and jump on early. So. Aw, Valentina. My birthday's on the 6th, so I'm a Taurus. So it's coming up, like, I think next week or the week after that. And I'm actually starting next week, I'll be on vacation for a couple weeks. So I'm not going to have lives for 2 weeks because I'm going to take a couple weeks off. I'm not doing, I don't have any appointments, so I'm going to be off for that way. I still will have e-readings, so I'm still going to allow e-readings for 1 week, but I'm going to take 2 weeks off and just to kind of recoup myself. Not only that, but my main plan is to focus on finishing the next 2 or 3 chapters of my book. So I want to be able to do that in the time that I have off because I want to get that out by summertime. Okay, it's like, what tea is this? I have a friend who thought that this was alcohol. I'm like, no, I can't. I don't drink during lives or during sessions because I will not be able to concentrate, and I gotta be able to concentrate. Now I may vape before a study group. Sometimes when I go for my walks, because sometimes my joints can hurt or they start to bug me, I'll vape a little bit just so that my joints don't really bother me as much. But it's not like I'm getting super high or anything. I'm just vaping just to kind of lessen or reduce the joint sensation. But this is actually just Kool-Aid. This is Kool-Aid mixed with this. It's this brain juice type of thing that I got on Amazon. It's available. But it's you take a scoop and it's got all these vitamins and minerals for your brain, and it's got some caffeine as well. So because sometimes I run a little lower on my energy, and so I that's what I'm drinking. So that's what I'm drinking just to kind of keep my energy up so that I can go get through the study group and I don't get tired. Oh. Oh, thanks, MK. She already answered for me. That's funny. Can I win the lotto? Oh, you're so funny. Let's see. Yes. Cassidy says, as a CNA who worked the cover unit, lost 23 residents I loved, and a nurse I adored to cover. Please get your vaccine and wear your mask, please, friend. Yes, thank you for saying that. I don't know what else to say about the whole vaccine and mask thing. I mean, it is a personal decision, and God help people who don't want to wear a mask and want to be stubborn, and who, I mean, like I said, it's an individual decision because some people can have reactions and can, most of the people that I know who got vaccinated, and I know a lot of people who got vaccinated, I've not had one person have a crazy reaction. Most of the people who I know that got vaccinated was Pfizer. Actually, all three, but mostly Pfizer, and there haven't been major reactions for them. The only side effects that they've encountered is just like a cold or feeling very tired and being drained for a few weeks. Sometimes, some people, the worst case. Most of the people were fine. Like after a few days, some people just had nothing. I have a friend who was part of the trials last year before it was even made public, back in May or June. He's fine, hasn't had any issues with the vaccine, and it was Pfizer as well. My cousin got the Tylenol, the Johnson & Johnson one, the Johnson & Johnson one. She was worried about the blood clotting issue, but I haven't had anyone that I know have any kind of issues with blood clotting, etc. And I've got people on Facebook and on social media going out there and saying, y'all are all guinea pigs and y'all are all, they're not trying this on anybody. Our bodies are designed to fight off these viruses and stuff like that. I mean, tell that to the 500,000 people that are already passed. Like, tell that to those people, because I only know of a handful of people who have had reactions. I know of 500,000 people at least who had a great reaction to COVID. So do the math, y'all. Do the math. We've already had millions and millions of people already get the vaccine, and we're not hearing of mass amounts of people dying from the vaccine. We've only got a small handful, because that's with any medication. It's not a perfect thing. It's not a win-win situation. You're fucked if you get the vaccine in some instances, and you're fucked if you don't in some instances. And if you die, you should have got the vaccine, because what are you going to do? You either die from COVID if you're in that category, or you're going to suffer from some side effects, being tired or whatever. And the people that I've seen posting stuff, they're going back and trying to bring up, science that is not rooted in real science. And they're talking about how our bodies are designed for this. I'm like, 500,000 people's bodies weren't designed for it. 500,000 people weren't. And that's just in this country. So no, no, I don't think so. So yeah, I don't, that's all bullshit in my opinion. But yeah, I don't know what else to say about the vaccine. I'm over the ignorance and the stupidity. People can choose not to get it. I'm not saying people have to get the vaccine, but definitely wear a mask. If you're not going to get the vaccine and you're still in a very susceptible category, protect yourself, protect the people around you, until the numbers go down so low that you can feel more comfortable, not having to worry about getting a vaccine if you don't want to get it. Yeah, Sarah Stardust is I hate telling people my struggles because I don't want to bring them down, so I say I'm okay. Yeah, I totally get it. I totally get it. Cassidy, it will, she says, I need to learn to do this without the filter. Thank you for this awakening. No, you will. Trust me, you will. It's going to naturally start to propagate. A big chunk of my book is about removing the filters, because the filters are what limit this being taken seriously in the medical community, in the scientific community, as far as psychic ability. People have not taken the psychic phenomena seriously, and there hasn't been enough money or research done to help support and prop it up in mainstream science. There have been studies done, and there have been things that have happened to help to share that with people in some way, but it's not been taken seriously. And I blame three things, which I go on about in my book. I blame Hollywood, because Hollywood is only interested in making something a really good movie. So they're pretty much going to make it special effects, make it seem like this, make it seem like that. And it's not like that. I blame psychics themselves, because we have people in this industry, as in the psychic industry, who perpetuate the ignorance because they can look good on camera for a moment, and it makes them look like they know everything or see everything. And that's not the reality of the situation, but they're going with it. And so I blame psychics, because they take advantage of the psychics. A lot of psychics take advantage of the public's ignorance about psychic phenomena, and they use it to their advantage to make themselves look good. And I also blame the skeptics, because they are ignorant as all hell, and they refuse to even acknowledge that this is a possibility that we all possess. Immediately, once you tell a hardcore skeptic, they will find that's their filter. They have a filter as well. Their filter is that this doesn't exist, it's impossible, and it can never happen. And I'm like, okay, well, there's plenty of evidence to support otherwise, but you're operating from a filter. And so that's your filter. So everything that you deal with is going to fall in line with that belief system, and you're limiting what you could potentially use yourself as well. And so I blame the skeptics as well, because they don't know shit. And the public's just ignorant in it. people making statements like, well, she should have known that that was going to happen, or he should have known that that was going to happen. Like, I think I saw someone, somebody was commenting about something, and they commented about, they were like, well, he should have seen it coming. And I was like, where the hell? And I chimed in because I'm not one to shut my mouth. I was like, where the hell did you get the idea that we know everything and see everything? Where the hell did you get that stupid idea? Because I didn't go around telling anybody that I know everything and see everything. I just told everybody that I can sense things, and I'm pretty accurate when it comes to making predictions. So where did you get the stupid idea that I know everything or see everything, and that I know everything in my own future? Where did you get that stupid idea? They never responded because I put them on the spot and I blasted them, and I'm like, tell me, because you're going to look like the idiot who's ignorant and doesn't know what the hell you're talking about. You don't know what you're talking about. And so that's and that's part of the issue. So the point of the book, in those parts of the book, is about changing the perception of this work, changing the public's idea of this work. And what I tell people is psychics are really good at guessing. And people cannot, but they're like, no, it's not just guesswork. I'm like, no, it is. It is guesswork. I was like, when you go to a doctor and you ask for a diagnosis of a condition, you don't know what's going on. The doctor's a specialist in that field, so they should have a better idea. They are probably going to use their instruments or feel their way around with some instruments or whatever to try to assess and troubleshoot and figure some things out. And usually there are patterns or certain things that they start to notice that will give them a good idea of what's going on with you. Same thing with a meteorologist. A meteorologist is not 100% accurate, neither is a doctor diagnosing 100% accurate. They're not 100% accurate, but they have technology that helps them to figure some things out. And by default, a doctor, even without the technical equipment, they can figure things out just by experience that they've had. Meteorologists, same thing. If a meteorologist goes outside and looks up at the sky and they look at the weather, the cloud patterns, etc., they can give you a pretty good idea of what they believe the weather's going to be like for that day and the following day as well. Psychics are the same way. We have experiences, and we have the ability to recognize energetic patterns, and with those patterns and those we're able to distinguish a lot of things. We're able to figure out some things as well. If you get a random person who has no medical background and you put them in an operating room and you ask them to diagnose what's going on, they can't tell you, and they're probably going to suck at it because they don't have the expertise of the specialty. You get the same person and put them in outside and you tell them to tell you the weather for the next 2 days. They probably are going to be wrong because they don't have the specialty. They don't have the experience of understanding and comprehending what those details and all those variables are going to indicate. Same thing with psychics. If a random person who has not developed their psychic ability and has not really spent a lot of time experiencing their own psychic ability and how it functions, they're not going to be able to really give you a good experience of psychic phenomena. But when you get a person who has had experiences with psychic phenomena, they practice their ability, they've spent time understanding it, they're going to have a better track record of getting more things down. And so that's the difference. And so psychics are really good guess makers, because they've spent time understanding patterns and variables, and they can make a judgment call which is a prediction, which is going to be more likely to be accurate depending on the person, because if they're a sucky psychic, they're not going to get anything. If they're really good, they're more likely going to get a lot of detail and useful information. And so I always tell people, psychics are just really good guessers. So are doctors, so are meteorologists. They have their instruments to help them. Psychics have their own instruments as well. Some people use cards, some people use pendulums, some people use crystals, whatever they want to use, but they have their own methodology. But it's all a built-in way of doing it. And all of us, we don't need all the stuff. We can do it by ourselves as long as we have the training. Most psychics don't have proper training. They're just like muddling through and trying to figure it out on their own, because there isn't enough of this being taken seriously, that you have enough serious teachers and serious programs and, competent organizations out there trying to help people to actually develop that. And that's what I want my first book to be about, is just that in itself. Because if it can be used as a premise for people, if people want to take it and call it their own program or their own method of learning how to do, I don't care. As long as it makes people more psychic in this world, I'm fine with that. So I don't need the credit, so as long as it's, helpful. Robin. So, Ferny, how do I ask this? Can a person see the psychic ability through the filter and fear of it being mental illness? Yes. So that's actually my mom's experience, because she's very psychic. My mom is very psychic, and we tend to pick up on things around the same time. She'll call me and tell me about a dream, and I'll like, okay, I had the same dream, or I had a similar dream the same week, so I know we're on the same level with sensing certain things. But at the same time, she's also schizophrenic, and so with people who are mentally ill, sometimes what they experience may not actually be a psychic experience or a experience with their ability. It may be a manifestation of their mental illness. It gets tricky, which is why it's so hard for people who do suffer from mental illnesses to be taken seriously, especially with psychic ability, because they may actually be right sometimes, but they also suffer from a mental illness, and that's not something you can avoid and get around. And so for myself, when I first started to develop, I actually thought maybe I was mentally ill, because my mom was mentally ill, my sister's bipolar, and a lot of people in my family are mentally ill. So I was like, maybe I'm just mentally ill. Maybe I'm not psychic. Maybe I just think I am, but I'm not. So I went to a doctor and I asked for, anything that can help me understand what was, going on. They didn't. They just gave me like Prozac. So they didn't really want it. They don't understand it. They don't get it. And so I took Prozac for a while. It messed me up. So I was like, nope, not doing that. But I decided, I was just like, okay, if I feel like killing people, or if I feel like going out there and committing crimes, something's wrong with me. I've never been that way. I've never gotten to that point. Everything I want to help people. So for me, it's coming from that perspective. But also, I think what's helped me to understand that this isn't a mental illness is the fact that I'm self-aware enough to ask myself the question. I also have a lot of clients who are psychiatrists and counselors and doctors, and they don't think I'm crazy. So I'm like, okay, good. So that's a good sign that I have a lot of psychiatrists and counselors and doctors who are clients. And so I'm okay with that. So that helps me feel like, okay, I'm not crazy. But to answer your questions, yeah, your filter can produce very mixed results and experiences, which is why it's very important to just not try to operate from a filter, because it's going to limit what you can experience, and it could actually be you having an experience that is limited and think it's a mental condition, when in fact it's not a mental condition. It's a filtered experience that is just totally morphing and warping the way you're truly and authentically perceiving the situation. Yes, good. Oh, perfect question. Pizza Gem. Love that question. I love that question. I like that question. Pin comment. Beautiful question. So let me answer that one, because that's a good one. Let's make it big. I'm trying to make it bigger. So there it goes. So Pizza Gem. What is an example of an experience of interacting with consciousness without a filter? For example, removing the angelic realm filter. Got it. So here is what I have experienced. So I, by default, from the get-go, when I decided to pull away from Catholicism, I have developed a direct one-on-one relationship with God, meaning that I don't need an intermediary. It's just me and it's God. That's fine. That's acceptable. I don't need an intermediary. The moment that I allowed myself to have that relationship, which we all have because we're all worthy of it. You don't have to be worthy of the love of ourselves. It's God. It's us in form. We're God, and then we're this in this form. The moment that I allowed myself to have that, automatically the information that was coming through was a lot more unique than what I was experiencing beforehand. And so an example of this is my mother, when she was younger. Here's an example of a filtered experience and a non-filtered experience. When my mother was a child, she and her brothers and sisters, they were in their bedroom and they started fighting with each other and they were arguing. And my mother got pushed off the bed. She was very angry. She was very upset, but she got pushed off the bed. As she got pushed off the bed, as she looked onto the floor next to her, she said she saw a tail that looked very similar to the tails you see, an actual tail, like a devil's tail. She saw a tail that looked very similar to what she had seen in the books that she had seen in the the Catholic faith. And so she saw something that was very similar. And so she freaked out. She thought she saw the devil's tail. And so she started screaming and freaking out, and she got on the bed, and they were all like, what's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? This is years before she had her first schizophrenic episode. She didn't actually have schizophrenic episodes or anything like that until she was in her 30s. But she saw a devil's tail. That's what she says. So going back to that experience in that moment, what I believe actually was happening was that my mother, being sensitive like myself, in the experience she was having with her siblings, there was a lot of energy being exerted, a lot of fear-based or anger or lower vibratory energy being expressed from all of them. And the energy isn't just going to like come out of each of us or going to be expressed and then evaporate. The energy expresses out of us, and then what tends to happen is the energy will coalesce. It will start to, because like attracts like. So the energy becomes something. It becomes a form. It becomes something. And so what my mom saw wasn't the energy. She saw the filtered version of the energy, which is based in her fear conditioning from Catholicism. So that's what she was experiencing. She wasn't actually seeing a devil's tail. She was seeing a manifestation of this lower vibratory state of energy. But her psyche, her filters kicked in, because the only way she could understand that was through her filter, her conditioning, which immediately produced this variation of understanding. So that's what was happening for her. For myself, whenever I have seen a spirit being, or and you can call it an angelic being. I call it spirit being because angels and spirits are two different things. Angels, from what most people understand, they think of people with wings and all this other stuff. That's a visual interpretation of that energy, but it's actually just pure love and supportive, nurturing energy. That's all it is. So we recognize it because we've been so conditioned and so trained to understand that energy, but we understand it as that. And so if someone's going to see a physical manifestation, they would encounter it as like this winged being and so forth. What I've been taught through Aja and what I've experienced directly is whenever I'm seeing like a spirit, I don't see a full-bodied apparition. I've only seen a spirit like that once in my lifetime, and I got it on film. But most people who are not used to seeing spirit energy may see an apparition or a full-bodied physical thing. I don't see them that way. Whenever I've actually seen them, I've only seen flashes of light or spheres. This is why I tell people that the sphere is a very sacred symbol. It's a very sacred shape because it represents consciousness, awareness, energy. And so when I've experienced them, they've always shown up as these sparks of light or spheres of light. And so that's how I know I'm looking at them. And what I was told by Aja, my soul, myself in higher form, was that this is an accurate representation of what we exist as in the most basic form. What most people experience when they see a full-bodied apparition isn't the full, complete version of that person. It is a version of that person that they're accepting because of what they've been conditioned to believe. And so it is just, and that's why people, when they catch orbs on camera, those are actually what they're capturing. They're capturing balls of energy or forms of energy in its most basic elemental state. But when you start to have an experience and you experience a being or a spirit, you may have a full apparition show up in your head or some version of that, because that's a filtered version. It's a filtered reaction. So that's an example of a filtered experience and a non-filtered experience. I am trying to, in my book, I'm trying to share all of the non-filtered versions of things that I've been able to experience, but that I've also seen others go through as well and not understand what's happening there. But it's still a version of energy, but it's being filtered by that person's mindset and perspective, and so it's going to show up in the way they can accept it. I hope that makes sense. I hope that you understand that, because it's not the easiest thing to grasp, and it took me forever to understand that and figure that out. And now that I figured it out, I'm like, oh, it totally makes sense now. I totally understand it. Let's see. Yeah, Cassidy. They can make designer babies, but those souls are still going to find a way to experience the life lesson they came in for. So that so that lesson will manifest in another way. Yeah, it's good. Honestly, like what you're born into isn't really going to matter, because at the end of the day, if the soul has an intention for that lifetime, then those elements and those themes are going to come up and play out in the way that they need to. It's almost like vehicles. Like if I buy an expensive, vehicle, and then I buy a cheap, little wonkadonk wonkadonk vehicle, like they can get me somewhere, but the experience with them is just going to be a bit different, and there's unique experiences that you will have with each, but you can still get to the same goals, you can still achieve the same things. So yeah, that's very correct. Yeah, Sarah's talking about how after my nephew was born with the condition, they had their eggs tested for the gene on the next three kids. Yeah, this is a reason why, and there's people ask me like, do you want to have children? And when I was younger, I did want to have children, but knowing how prevalent mental illness is in my family, and also understanding the struggle that I went through with my sister, and also with my mother, I do not want those genes or those variations of elements given to another child. Like, even though from a spiritual perspective I could say, whatever is going to occur is going to occur, but I have control over that. In my I in the moment of deciding, I have control over that, and I don't want to bring a child into this world with any kind of issue like that, because I know what it was like for me going through that, not only experiencing and living through it with my mother and my sister, but also I know how difficult it's been for them. So I don't really want to expose a child to that, and I don't want to bring a child into this world with already having to deal with those types of challenges. I just don't want to. Cool Hand Luke 8:14 says, "Are humans that donate organs ever still conscious, or are their souls still present when they do it?" Their souls are always present. So the spirit personality is what we are in physical form. When we die and we no longer have a physical body, there's still the physical personality. That doesn't cease. The personality is still present. The soul is a higher version of the personality. The soul is a much more all-encompassing version. The soul is always present. The soul is never not present or not engaged in anything. The soul is always, it is. It's just like God. Is God present when, no. It is what it is, because the soul is another version of God in a form that we can accept. And so whenever someone when are humans that donate organs ever still conscious? So whenever someone donates an organ, it's a physical component of that individual that has cell memory attached to it, meaning all of our cells have memory, all of our genetic structure has memory. So whenever someone gets they get an organ from a person who's deceased, the person's spirit personality is done. It's no longer engaged in this reality. It's no longer part of the process. But the person that receives the organ, they may actually have experiences or have perspectives that associated with the individual who originally had that organ. So they may actually embody and take on some of those elements, because there's cell memory there. They've done studies on this, so this isn't just me making this up out of my ass. This is like something that's actually been studied. There's actually a really good film with Jessica Alba, and it's about her sight being restored. She's given the eyes of a woman who died in a fire, and she's having all these flashbacks and all these things. That's actually a real thing that's happened in certain instances. There was a story of a woman who she was stabbed. She was stabbed. There was a woman who was stabbed, and her organs, she died. Her organs were donated to another person. Another woman took on the organs, didn't know anything about the person that was stabbed, but she got one of the organs, and she started having nightmares of being stabbed and of this memory that wasn't hers. And so it actually was so accurate in detail that she was able to find out where the organ came from, found out what was going on, and reported what she had gained and seen, and they were able to, I believe they were able to arrest the individual who murdered the first woman. So there's cell memory there. And so, just because you're no longer in your physical body, you're utilizing it, doesn't mean that your body is empty and there's nothing to it. There's still energy and understanding attached to the different components of the body. Yeah. Yes, I agree, Sarah. My body, my choice, as is your choice to do. Exactly. It is everyone's decision. So Sam has a good question. Sam, the cute penguin. In your opinion, do you see them as safe? So first of all, I'm not a doctor. Remember, I'm just a psychic. I'm just a sensitive. I can only tell you what I sense or what I feel. But I have made predictions on this. I think that the predictions that I made on it were slightly off because I said that there would be 3 vaccines out by spring or by summer, and that one of the vaccines was going to have the best track record. The others wouldn't so much, and that people were going to freak out because they were going to want the vaccine that had the better track record and they weren't going to want some of the others. And this was going to be an issue that was happening across the world as well. But when I initially saw that, I thought there was going to be 3 vaccines across the world, one in the US, one in Europe, and then one in Asia. We actually have 3 in the US. So actually the 3 are in the US. I do believe one of them, and I said that the one that people would want is the one that is from Great Britain or from the UK. Well, I believe the Pfizer is a collaboration of an American and a European company. Then that's what it's produced from. So I'm thinking, and so that's the one that's got the better track record than the other 2. However, it just depends on the individual and what they prefer themselves. Yeah, Zaza, she says, so I get visitors at night where I feel their presence and we speak, and unless I release their message to family members to validate what they are saying, I feel anxious until I release the message. Yeah, those are spirit bullies. Those are spirit bullies. I have a very, very, very clear agreement with them because I basically said to God, I'm like, look, I'm willing to do this work. I'm willing to step in and do what is called of me. However, I am not going to have my life completely turned upside down and run by spirits 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So they will have to work within within what I'm willing to do. I'm not going to kill myself trying to help them or trying to do this for them because they don't understand boundaries. So I have a very clear boundary with spirits and they know better. They used to come around in the beginning. They used to come around all the time. They would stop in when I'd be like off I'd be on a day off or I'd be watching TV. They'd stop on. I'd start seeing the sparkles. I'd start seeing the spheres and they'd start showing up. And immediately I would be like, I see you. You're going to have to come back when I'm on the clock because I'm off the clock. This is my time. I already devote enough of my time to do this and it's exhausting. So y'all are going to have to come back when I'm working. And I'm more than happy to help y'all then. So I have a very, very specific relationship with them. For the most part, they respect that. They don't really mess with me unless I'm open to it and I'm willing to help them. But they don't mess with me. They know better. However, there have been times where I've got one or two that may pop in and push past that boundary. They're like, no, Ferny, like you're going to help me whether you like it or not. But it's usually the loved ones of people that I know. So it's usually like a friend's parent or, whatnot. So it's usually that. Rarely is it like just this random stranger. But they are pretty good at respecting my boundaries. So you need to set those boundaries with them because I feel that every time I get in front of the lives and do the readings, and every time I get in front of a client and I do the readings, I have anxiety. It's there. It builds up. Once I start going and I get into a flow, automatically it ceases and it starts to release. It's like a built up form of energy. Oh, it's very normal. Everybody can do this. So, all right, let me go over here. Everybody can do this. The fact that people are walking around like, I'm so special. I'm like, girl, you're like full of it. Like, you need to stop drawing attention to yourself and trying to make yourself feel special and feel worthy or feel like above everybody else. Because you're not. You have an ability just like everybody else. Now, get good at it because just having the ability isn't enough. Be good with it. Get better at it. Use it in a very effective way. and never stop doing that. Then I will give you some props because you have the ability. But if you're just walking around, I'm special, everybody, look at me, look at like this ain't about the psychic ability. This ain't about helping people. This is about you using this and using it as an opportunity to be on a stage and to get attention and to bring attention to yourself. And you'll find that a lot in this industry. A lot of psychics, a lot of spiritual people put themselves out there and they pretend like they care about helping people or like they care about the work. They don't. They just want the attention. And they're using it as an opportunity to get that. And you'll run into that a lot. I always say to people, like when you're dealing with spiritual people who consider themselves spiritual teachers, if they're going around and they're teaching philosophy and they're teaching whatever, I always tell people you can tell the difference between an authentic teacher and someone who is just using it as a way to make money or to build themselves up. The person who is using it as a way to build themselves up or to make money have zero experience or very little experience to be able to use as an example. And so when you run into people who are using the same 2 or 3 experiences over and over and over again, they're limited. They don't really have a lot of the spiritual knowledge that they've learned. They don't have enough of it ingrained and integrated into their life. They don't understand it fully. They're only regurgitating what they're reading. And so that's the difference. People who are spiritual teachers and they have a lot of understanding of the information that they teach will come up with example after example after example because your whole life has been a goddamn example of these teachings and you understand it and you get it and you're like, oh, this is an example of this. And they never stop. The examples never stop. They continue and continue and continue. Marie, this is a good question. Hi, Ferny. I'm currently working on being positive and manifesting the future of my dreams. Any suggestions, advice? Yeah, stop with having to be positive. It's okay to be human. We're here to be human. We're here to have human lives and experience the full spectrum of human experience, which is both positive and negative. Now, if you can get to a balance where most of your experiences are loving or joyful or positive, go for it because that's the goal. But don't assume that you're going to be able to be positive 100% of the time because that's toxic positivity. That turns into people who become delusional and refuse to accept what is happening and completely get sidetracked and do not participate or get involved in situations when they actually need to. I know a lot of people who are positive minded and they're always focused on positivity. And they were blasting everyone last year because when everything started to go to hell in a handbasket, all the political craziness started, all of the COVID stuff started. I mean, it was a tough year for a lot of people, myself included. And so when last year started, they were like, only focus on positivity. We're going to ascend beyond this. This is going to disappear. And we're going to just create a reality where this is not real. This is not existing. Like that's the mindset and the delusional perspective. And in my mind, I'm like, this is the human drama. You chose to get your ass in that bodysuit to come down here to participate in this entire experience. And then you want to act like you're not a part of it. Like that's the stupidest thing in the world. Like you're missing out on opportunities here. Like this is a chance for you to be a part of something and to be engaged, not to ignore it and to pretend like you're going to create this delusionary world where none of this exists. So all the people who I know who were doing that, every single one of them cracked. Every single one of them, they broke. They were ready to kill themselves, jump off bridges. I mean, they broke. And I saw it over and over and over again. And I was like, what happened to all this positivity, y'all? What happened to all this? Like, everything is going to work out. It's going to be perfect. There's going to be no pain. We're going to ascend. You don't look ascended. You don't look like you're ascending. So they didn't understand things fully. They were obsessed with the idea of being positive. And so they were not able to adapt or to gain from the experience what they could have. And it was not an easy thing to do, but they broke. And I saw it over. I mean, it was heartbreaking to me because I was like, whoa, like I thought you were put together. Like I thought you had it down. And then for you to crack that simply or for you to break down that fast, I was like, I was not expecting that. But the people who are okay with being human, okay with experiencing a human life, all angles of it, did much better. You should focus on having a more positive experience here. Most of my life now is pretty good, pretty joyful. Yeah, I'm still human. I have days where I wake up and I'm crabby because I don't want to be here in this physical body, but I'm still here. I'm going to do what I got to do. So I got to get myself to that level. I got to get myself right for the day, which is what my morning ritual and practice is about, is getting right for the day so that I can be here and utilize this experience and this opportunity that we all have, not to ignore it, not to avoid it, not to push it away, but to have a genuine, authentic human experience. But I would rather be on the lighter spectrum than on the painful, darker, suffering spectrum. So that's what I focus for myself. So to answer your question, Marie, don't worry so much about being positive. Just focus more on being at peace in yourself. Because if you focus more on being at peace within yourself about your life and what you're going through and what you're experiencing and the things that are there, then you will start to release the tension and the pushback on the things that are causing you to feel suffering. Not only that, but you'll also start to look at what you can change, because you do have a lot within your control. You might just be bad at making certain decisions or choices, and you can change that. And so if you come to peace with yourself, accept what is, and then look at what you can change, work on those things, then that already is huge, because the majority of people who operate in this world do not even do that. So that's the biggest first step. The second thing I would recommend is understanding the power of your state of being. And the state of being is based on what's going on in your thoughts on a regular basis, what you are feeling or reacting to on a regular basis, and what you intend. And a lot of people, what happens is, especially people who are new to manifestational work, they think that being positive or thinking positive is automatically going to guarantee them what they want, but then they are constantly worried about shit, and then they're constantly reacting in pain and suffering to things. That's a mixed signal. That is a cross signal. You're not going to go anywhere with that. You have to line up in all areas and do it consistently, and that takes practice. There's a really good book by Bendijo Massaro. Bendijo Massaro, Benthino. Massaro, Massaro. It's a black book, and you can get it on Amazon. It's called Super Accelerated Living. It's a really good book to help you understand how to actually shift your state of being. Not just think positive, not just try to manifest something. The moment you try to manifest anything, you are basically reducing your ability to have a better life, because you're focused on a thing, not on a state of being. The moment you focus on a state of being, the thing that you desire will probably end up showing up in a different way or in an easier way, and you don't even have to ask for it. So, Michelle, the book, my target for getting the book out is July. So my target is to try to get it get it out there by July. It's all self-publishing, because I'm doing self-publishing. I'm actually doing it as a self-publish, and then it's my first book. I want to have several, but that's my first one, and then I'm going to send that as a manuscript to some of the larger companies, because my goal is to get it out there so people have the information and they can use it to their advantage. It's not about me. It's about helping people. So that's my goal. But publishers these days don't take you seriously, and they're not going to give you an opportunity to have a book, because they are focused on what's going to sell. And these days, unless you have a large following, or unless the material is absolutely incredible, which I think Blinds is, but unless it's absolutely incredible, and even if it's incredible, if you don't have a following and if you're an unknown, then by default, there's a lot more money that has to go into advertising and promoting the material. That's why publishers nowadays are grasping and grabbing onto people who are well-known or famous or whatever, and then that's how they get their book deals. That's not my approach. My approach is like, I'm just going to write something really good. I'm going to put it out there. I'm going to get as much of it out there as I can, and then I'll send it to some publishers to see if they're interested in it. That doesn't mean that I'm going to go with the publisher just because they want to screw you out of your money just as much as because they want to make a buck. That's what they're focused on. They don't really care. And if they're going to want to change a lot of what I wrote in a completely different way, I don't want to. I'd rather continue to self-publish and then just go that angle, go that route. Ain't Angie, good question. Do you think that taking medication screws up the ability to be a psychic medium? It can and then it can't. Yes and no. So let me tell you about myself, because I use myself as an example, because for me to just speak about it and I give you an example. So I suffer from ADD. I suffer from attention deficit disorder, and I'm very easily so I suffer from ADD. I've gone to the doctor. I've been diagnosed. And when I work with clients and I'm doing client work, because I have to stay focused, especially right now, I have to stay focused. I take Adderall on my work days. So I take a 5 milligram dose, which is a very small dose. And then I take another 5 during the midway point if I need that. I may take another one towards the end of the day when I'm getting to the limits, but I try not to, just because for an average person, they usually prescribe 15. I'm only doing 5 or 10. So I'm trying to stay within that range. 15, I'll do it if I have to, but I try to stay in that just so I can keep it there. And so I take the medication because it helps me to do the work that I need to do. Now, people can have all kinds of opinions about that. I don't give a damn about everybody else's opinions, because I know what I'm doing and I know how I'm doing it. But I know from experience that people who sometimes they do have a budding psychic ability, if they have a little bit of alcohol, if they have enough alcohol to get them to feel more relaxed, it allows for more psychic ability to come through. But if they drink enough alcohol that it starts to impair their cognitive function, the ability is crap. So, and it completely shuts it down. And so it has to be just enough to make you relaxed enough, but not enough that you start to bomb. For myself, because I vape and I do edibles or THC, whenever I have to do a sativa, not a indica, and indica will put me to sleep. I will sleep. A sativa, I can also sleep with a sativa, but a sativa allows for my creativity to kind of become more amplified. I also have had some of my most significant public predictions come through when I was on a sativa, but I don't use it to get high or to be like in that zone. I just do it to like loosen my sensitivity level up a little bit, because you can be really sensitive. So I loosen up my sensitivity level, which drops some of the anxiety, but it still allows for that freedom of thought and that ability to be a little more relaxed. It's a perfect zone. It's like a really refined zone that you have to be careful with. But if you do too much, that's it. You're like going into like you're overshooting your mark. So it just depends on the individual. But drugs can definitely shut this ability down. And actually, whenever I do take an edible before I go to sleep, I will not dream. I won't dream. I won't have any dreams. I won't have any prophetic dreams, nothing. If I vape slightly before I go to sleep, I will still dream. If I don't take anything, I probably will have more trouble going to sleep because my brain is still very active, but I will also still have dreams. So it's kind of like a fine line between the two, but it just depends on the medication. Yeah, I am. Yeah, Red Robin. I am. I'm going to sell it on Amazon. That's where it's going to be at. So I'm going to be putting it up on Amazon. I'm actually going to give away a crap load of copies. So I'm planning on giving away like 25 or 50 copies and just send them out. And then I'm also going to give away a lot of ebook copies as well, because I'm again, my plan is to just get this out. And so it's like I'm gonna send out a crap load of copies. I'm gonna have like a contest for people so they can get copies and just give them out. Just give them out so people can have them. All right, guys, I think I'm done with our questions today, because I think I'm all done. So I love you all. Thanks so much for tuning in. I will be back on Friday for our next study group time. So until then,